Welcome to day 7 of the conference. I'm Ernst Schraube from Roskilde University. I want to introduce the keynote speaker of this first session of today, Athanasios Marvakis. Athanasios Marvakis is professor of social psychology at the School of Education at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece. The central focus of his research and writing is on rethinking the language of learning in both educational practice and social movements. In his work, he illuminates how learning originates from the conflictuality, dilemmas, and crises of everyday life. However, he also engages in the concrete local and global crises of people in their everyday life. For example, the suffering and struggle of migrants and refugees in its connection with current politics and social relations. Based on his concern with the everyday experience of people in crisis, he is also engaged in reflecting how psychology as a science is part of the problem, and how overcoming the crisis of today also requires a fundamental renewal of psychological theory, methodology, and research practice. The title of his talk is Security as Pacification, the Trap of Psychologizing Social Phenomena. Athanasios, thanks for joining in. We are looking forward to your talk.
Good morning out there in the real world. My intention here is to address the pandemic psychologization of social phenomena in the discipline of psychology and the social sciences generally. Psychologization contributes actually to the pacification of the population. Italian psychiatrist Franco Basaglia speaks in this context even about crimes of pacification as a functional moment of psychology as its disciplinary contribution to securing the insecurity of capitalist order. I want to unfold my argument in 4 steps. The factuality of crisis and crisis talk, the presence of psychology in crisis talk, psychologization as the foundation of the business of psychology, and finally, solidarity as more than an act of individual ethics. Let me start with a very topical fact and observation from the so-called pandemic crisis in Greece. What happened? As the lockdown measures are loosening, a lot of people in Greece cities are back to using the rare public spaces that have not been commercialized. Greek police use selective and excessive violence against people who gather in public squares, arguing that they have to limit the spread of the virus and prevent a second wave of infection. The police intervene predominantly in lower middle class neighborhoods. Affluent districts are left undisturbed, as are densely populated public events initiated by high-ranking political figures. Greek architect Stavros Stavridis explains that this is not so much the innocent handling of a public health crisis as socially marked practices intended to change the city towards exclusion and control. What we see here is a logic within the authoritarian neoliberal rollback in Greece. Environmental, labor, and other deregulations had been pushed by the new government long before the corona pandemic. These police actions are likely also a form of anticipatory insurgency management. Stavridis explains that the coming impoverishment will result in certain groups being ejected from public spaces in which they cannot participate as consumers. As the sensational effect of corona pandemic starts to fade a little, other recent instances of crisis talk emerge. In Greece, particularly, one is reminded of another so-called crisis. From autumn 2009 until early summer 2010, a politically orchestrated staging of the media unfolded, imposing an exclusive label to what was going wrong in Greece: the state debt crisis. This producing and naming of a state debt crisis was important for our elites. It served to convince us that there is no alternative. The only legitimate solution to keeping Greek society from falling into the abyss were brutal austerity measures, which have been in place since then. In times of so-called crisis, what we see is to a significant extent staged. It attains its factuality from power-related representation, which projects only one seemingly reasonable, legitimate naming and only one unavoidable solution. And what we see has been produced by powerful political actions. The Greek state debt crisis, for example, gained its factuality from particular political initiatives by Greek and or European elites. Those same Greek and European elites also decided who the primary beneficiaries of the ostensibly sole solution should be, and who would receive the bill for the party. For the elites, the steps to follow were mostly about how to best orchestrate a suitable political strategy and an effective staging in the media to bring about public compliance with the only solution that served the already identified beneficiaries, so-called structural adjustments of the Greek economy, which translated into brutal austerity measures for the population. What is the position and involvement of psychology in all this? If what we see are the effects of our dealing with something, it is not only the ease of naming and the compliance with it that should bother us. Much trickier and more important is the fact that both the subject and the prices, the us and the dealing with, are power-permeated and contested entities and practices. Much of what we attribute to the factuality of some crisis is actually produced by powerful elites and labeled by authoritative social scientists. This production of something we call crisis also include omissions, with the effect that particular solutions appear exclusive and unavoidable. Since it is part of our business as psychologists and social scientists generally that we receive salary and prestige for conceiving and suggesting names and solutions, we are urged to be suspicious about our own contributions to any crisis talk. One keyword in our discussion here is compliance. Social scientists are routinely asked to offer the expert knowledge to bring about compliance in the populace. Compliance with the proposed names of social phenomena, usually dubbing them as problems. Compliance with seemingly sole and unavoidable solutions. And compliance with serving the already decided beneficiaries. In the Greek state debt crisis, a few big German and French banks. The reasons for why compliance is necessary, let's say social, economic, or health issues, are certainly not arbitrary. Neither are the imposed measures. But not being arbitrary does not mean that these referents have been deduced scientifically from pre-existing objective facts. Rather, they are chosen and imposed by political calculation to bestow legitimacy. The call for compliance is a call for the provision of evidence-based legitimation of administrative, bureaucratic action or activity. Those who order and purchase such scientific knowledge and expertise are predominantly administrations and bureaucracies. And their bureaucratic perspective asks for psychological services that encourage and realize very specific changes in individuals or small groups. In the context of the coronavirus crisis, it is quite difficult to accept public health as the only motivation for imposed interventions. If public health were the bureaucratic concern, one wonders where such ardor has been against the extensive use of antibiotics in factory farming, which causes bacterial resistance with a high death toll in patients. One also wonders why social distancing seems irrelevant in refugee and immigration workers' camps, in jails and nursing homes. Is the virus really that selectively dangerous? How do social sciences join the stage for the production of compliance? The timeless tool for the discipline of the social sciences, generally, is the psychologization of social phenomena. Psychologization is not some cognitive shortcoming or failure, but rather a particular way of channeling the understanding of human action and agency. Psychologization contributes to compliance and to pacification of the subject. For the psychologization to work, there are at least three levers, three consecutive reductions that have to build complementarily upon each other. The first lever is what we call reductio ad individuum. With this reduction, social phenomena are interpreted and addressed as individual failures or deficits, or as tasks for individuals to be accomplished. They are confined to some inner states or processes, some purposes, motives, or needs of individuals. Conflicts, problems, and contradictions extant in organization of action, in the organization of work, are being transferred onto individual subjects. Contradictions are translated into problems of and for individual subjectivity and individual subjects, for example, through the therapeuticization of conflicts or through the interpretation of school learning as an issue of individual motivation. The second lever is the prevailing functionalism, which blindly reflects both the ruling discipline of psychology and the self-understanding of our action or agency. Given the psycho-boom of the last decades, we can assume that the ruling psychology has occupied the self-understanding of our own agency, independently from or even in contrast to our own moral or political intentions. Functionalism presumes that we are not conducting our lives by ourselves, at least not under self-selected circumstances. We are functioning, meaning that we are carrying out, executing, or performing functions, orders, or tasks which are given to us from above, from outside, or from inside. For any assessment of our action, of our agency, it is only important how successfully or efficiently we function, how correctly or efficiently we execute an assigned task. In this functionalistic understanding of action, we do not co-decide which tasks are to be executed, why and from whom. The content of our action is none of our business. Only the performance, the execution of assigned tasks, the how of our action. For psychology, the functionalistic reduction of the agency of the others, for example our clients, presupposes and simultaneously supports a reductive self-understanding of the action and agency of psychologists themselves. It may begin with a functionalistic misunderstanding of the subject matter, the task of psychology, to be complemented by the functionalistic self-misunderstanding of one's own work. Or it may begin the other way around. A functionalistic self-misunderstanding of one's own work as the execution of assigned tasks or questions is then uncritically and unquestioningly translated into the necessity of action for the subject clients. Thus, human action and agency do not constitute and are not constituted in everyday life with its practical struggles and with techniques, technologies, responsibilities and knowledge. No, it is supposed to be deducible from societal demands and is to be derived from discourses that transport, articulate and offer societal demands with which to simply comply. Requirements and demands posited by those in power for subjects are misinterpreted automatically as behaviors adopted by subjects. Psychology perceives the subject and subjectivity not as autonomous nor or as existing in relation to social demands. Rather, humans exist only as a function of these requirements. In this framework, the ultimate question can therefore only be how well humans function and reproduce specific requirements, successfully or unsuccessfully. Autonomy vis-à-vis dominant requirements can only appear as a dysfunction of the subject, not as a dysfunction of the social order. What a technocratic misunderstanding of human action, social sciences and society. The third lever is the very practical supplement and consequence of the functionalistic deductive logic of human behavior. The banishment of the political character of every human action. Of course, there are plenty of facets in psychology's connection with the political. However, despite this variety, the political character of human action tends to be conceptualized as complementary value to be added from the outside by the individual psychologist according to their political ethical gusto. The political character of human action refers to its social contextualization. It refers to human action as constituting and being constituted by the social and its reaching out to the organization of sociality by planning, organizing, caring, prevention and foresight. The political is a constitutive moment of every human action. It encompasses transcendent reference beyond the concrete acting individual and the individual act. Agency cannot only be executing of given tasks. We must also recognize its anticipative and creative dimensions. Its ability not only to answer given questions and to solve existing problems, but also to formulate questions and to indicate phenomena as being problematic and calling for action. Human action does not only maintain and sustain, it also pioneers alternative social relations, and thus it is always political. In this understanding, psychology is always political. It includes the reflection on political assumptions that exist within our respective psychological theories and practices. It includes reflections about the emergence of distinct subjectivities and subjects, together with their individual points of view within psychological theory and practice. It includes reflections on the emergence of distinct, explicit or tacit, interests of these subjects in their subject positions. To put it differently, psychology is politics by other means. Of course, the practice of psychologization has social consequences as well. The bureaucratic logic that requests psychologizing services aims primarily at keeping the existing social order as it is, and for this purpose it attempts to induce specific changes in individuals or small groups. Psychologization promises the security of action with regard to the dominant social order, though differently for subjects in different social positions. For example, delivery service professionals are compliant and so, they hope, do not endanger their own social position and reproduction. Their clients, the addressees, are compliant towards the ruling order and are thus pacified. Italian psychiatrist Franco Basaglia refers to social scientists as a social group as experts on and specialists in manipulation and oppression, and assigns us a portion of the responsibility for committing crimini departure, which we could translate as crimes of pacification. Intellectuals operate as the agents of power, offering their expertise in order to secure the spontaneous compliance of the subjects. As a professional group, not as single individuals, social scientists manifest a servile mindset towards the forces of power, supporting the pacification and servility of their clients. But there is no point in trying to reverse the direction of psychologization. Psychologization is not the failure of any individual social scientist that has to be diagnosed and corrected. Rather, psychologization is itself a social phenomenon. Psychologization and pacification as its social consequence is the normal business of a successful discipline we call psychology. It designates normality and professional success within antagonistic societies. Psychologization is the operational foundation, the basis for our business, the premise for the social recognition and allocation of resources and prestige to the discipline of psychology. It is a normalizing action. Psychologization is a consequence of a series of concurrent misunderstandings on different levels. A functionalist misunderstanding of the subject matter of psychology, the reduction of agency of isolated individuals confined to executing, performing assigned tasks. A disciplinary self-misunderstanding, psychologization as societal assignment, so to say. A professional misunderstanding, psychologization as necessary moment of contradictory professional praxis, as waged labor or self-employed delivery service. It is helpful to put these misunderstandings into their social and historical context. Psychology emerged and developed as part of the labor-divided chain of the productive force science. In this context, it is itself a specific component or a tool in the fragmented but also fragmenting treatment of the social question within capitalism. Since the beginning of the 20th century, the historical deal between the elites in power and the emerging social sciences has been not to negotiate the social question as an issue of the social order, but to address it via the adaptation, improvement, and marginalization of individuals and small groups. As a productive force in contradictory societies, psychology itself remains contradictory. The more efficient it becomes, the more it becomes an integral part of the very problems it is called on to help resolve. After the radical changes of the last decades in our societies, the social sciences must re-legitimize their recognition also for the newly emerging form of sociality. The transfer service of psychology for the benefit of the neoliberal transformation consists in contributing to the extended commodification of the psychic, to its redefinition as a marketable good. Social phenomena are redefined as private commodities which respond to the individual private demands. In the neoliberal logic, these demands must be paid for privately as well. Psychologization, then, is a social phenomenon. Counter-accusations and denunciations are not practices of resistance. Solidarity is not an act of individual morality, ethics, or generosity. Resistance and solidarity do not result from a subjectively intended yet ultimately voluntarist and abstract solidarization with the oppressed and their interests. The basic, practical, theoretical task for every critical psychology is to conceptualize the political grammar of socially organized theoretical and practical human activity, starting with reinterpreting and contextualizing extant naming practices and all of their confinements and implicit misunderstandings. The task is to grasp and contextualize various subjective positions, to consider all explicit or implicit interests, perspectives, and premises of concrete subjects in these positions, and to point to simultaneously existing possibilities and obstacles within socially organized practices. This will help us identify non-moralist and socially weighted responsibilities for the respective premises in our practices. And it will support making positions and interests communicable and negotiable. It will enable us to act as political subjects and not to just operate and function as social scientists or as normal persons. The aim of such a perspective is not only to develop an ethical critique of the use and abuse of knowledge and abilities by certain professionals, neither is it a mere sociological critique of a professional branch within a society that is pervaded by inequalities and conflicts. Rather, we have to fundamentally advance our critique to strive for a rethinking of the theoretical and social reductions of social sciences within a capitalist society. Do we really want to continue within the perspective of the bureaucracy, probing for knowledge about people and the management of human action confined to only performance and execution? Or do we want rather to switch towards a social movement perspective, interested in knowledge for people who are co-defining questions and co-deciding about potential answers and solutions to be pursued. What is necessary is a fundamental, a radical, methodological change of perspective in the social sciences. But with this potential methodological change, we are putting our own social reproduction in jeopardy as wage laborers and service providers who rely on the bureaucracies. The differentiated offers and promises from above to secure one's own situation by discounting one's very needs are part and parcel of the shared hindrances we will all have to deal with together. But instead of accepting, or sometimes well-paid roles as social engineers, we have to develop into political subjects. This includes resistance to many forms and circumstances where, as social scientists, we think that we have to determine the problems of and the actions for others, without these others. We cannot overcome coercion by taking the side of others abstractly, or even by simply supporting their struggles practically. If we conceive these struggles with genuine solidarity, we have to initiate processes for social self-understanding about the shared, albeit different, blockages, hindrances, and coercions that prevent all of us from acting along our recognized needs. To limit one's solidarity to only oneself and one's own ultimately means the total abdication of solidarity, even to oneself. Thank you very much.